We are holding, if you all remember, we said we were going to start at, I believe, the Mishnah, the first Mishnah on 12b2. The first Mishnah on the Mishnah on 12b2. Okay? So Shabbos's Gemara, I don't know if you guys got a chance to do it or not, was not an easy Gemara, but it really was stuff that we've learned before. Just to go real quick, does everybody remember the rule of the 10 stores? You remember this vaguely? There are 9 kosher stores and 1 non-kosher store. If you find a piece of meat out on the floor, sitting in the middle of power line, is it kosher or is it not? The majority of stores are kosher. One store is not. And so the Gemara calls kol de parish miruba parish, something that's separate. I'm just repeating a topic from Shabbos. What it calls something that's separate is considered completely separated from the majority. That piece of meat was found on the floor. The odds are it came from the majority of kosher stores, 9 kosher stores versus 1 non-kosher store. If, however, you go shopping and you get a brain freeze and you don't know where you went, meaning you bought a piece of meat and you don't remember if you went to the kosher deli in Winn-Dixie or to the non-kosher deli in Winn-Dixie. One is in front of the other. And now it's in your Winn-Dixie shopping bag. Ah, that's something else. The meat wasn't found in the street, and we could assume the majority. It's found in your bag. Where did you go? Well, now you, on a probability theory, have as much probability to go into this store as into that store. Kol kivua kemechzal mechzadami. Anything that is stationary, that means this piece of meat was in a store. You went into the store to take the meat off the shelf. That means you have, on a probability theory, as much probability to walk into this store as you had into this store. Now that means everything is 50-50, and therefore the meat becomes non-kosher. See that? If the meat is out on power line, just hanging out over there, right? You say, where did this meat go?
You're not allowed to eat it, that's all.
You're not allowed to eat it. That's what I'm saying. It's also to eat. But if you find that same piece of meat out in power line, you could eat it. Because it's called the parish, Maruba parish. The point of this is, only I'm mentioning it because it came up over here on the Naziris and etc. and all the thing. It's not important. If you didn't get a chance to do Shabbos Gemara and you go back, you're going to bang into this. The reason why I just mentioned it is because this idea comes up all over Shas. Amazingly, in essence, it's the probability theory, right? Versus the majority. And when do you apply the majority? When do you apply probability? And that's it. Anyways, we're now to today's Mishnah.
Yitzhak, why would they even take the chance either way?
Because meat was extraordinarily expensive.
Well, not even to say anything.
Because the answer is halacha doesn't work that way. Halacha doesn't is not an ostrich, in case you haven't discovered. There isn't a topic that isn't discussed in Shas.
I'm sorry. I meant why would they take the chance, whether it was the location or the probability? Why would they take the chance to eat it? Why would they just say, I really don't know where this came, and I'm not taking that chance?
So the answer is, first of all, the Rabbanim were careful about the money of Jews. That's number one. It costs money, meat. We're not going to just flip it.
You don't have to go.
One second. The easy answer is no. A rabbi worth his salt has the capability of saying yes. It's very easy to be a rabbi and say, no, 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 no. That's not the halacha. That's not the law. The law is, if it's outside on its own, then you can look at the majority. If it's inside and it didn't move and you went in, you got to look at the probabilities of where you go. Those are two complete separate situations. They are two different laws. See, what you're saying is take the easy way out.
Or take the sure way out.
It's not the sure way.
Well, if you don't do it, then you're sure you didn't do it.
But then what are you doing with that piece of meat?
You take as an example, let's say Ukraine right now.
Right.
Everything is destroyed. Food is scarce. You can't find, there's hunger everywhere. Now you found a piece of meat, a nice steak, beautiful steak in a bag, nicely wrapped and everything else. And it was in a Jewish neighborhood, right?
Nope.
So now that means you could be feeding your family right now, or they could remain hungry. That's when the halacha comes in. Then you say, you go basar and you could eat that meat without any. Your heart doesn't have to pound inside you that maybe you're eating non-kosher.
Because you're not eating non-kosher. The halacha is that the meat is completely 100% kosher.
So that's where Jeff's thing will come into play.
You
want to know what the halacha is.
But if the bag is yours, Jerry, Jeff, if the bag is your bag, and you go, oh, that's where I left my bag. And then you say, oh, what's this meat in here? Now you can't feed your family. Simple.
Okay.
You see, you're asking.
Well, he had a brain freeze.
Yeah. Well, guys, I'm going to give you the flip side. Just to take this, it's not a comparative case, but the idea that you have to know the halacha. We're going to bang into this story many times in Shas, where one of the great Tanoim Amoraim are having a romantic moment with their wives, and all of a sudden they discover that they have one of their students under the bed.
Yes.
and the rabbi says, "What are you doing here?" And he said, and the Talmud says, "Zui Torah, this is Torah, v'tzarech lamadati, and I have to learn." That's how the Gemara leaves it. Each time, the same way. And it's not the same Talmud, it's many different Talmud, different things. So you're going to say that's ridiculous. But the Gemara is trying to bring a point. Everything is a teachable moment. Everything is an alathic moment. Don't take the easy way out. If you get to a Rav and his fallback position is always no, then he's not the Rav to be asking questions to. There was a famous Rav in Borough Park, the Kallisberger Rav, right? What was his name? Rav Chatzkel Roth, the great Rav Chatzkel Roth, Zechenu Livracha, a genius. He was famous for what we call today Mara Shilas, okay? Meaning women questions, blood questions, okay? Whether you blood or no blood. The point here was that the famous joke with him is he was driving in Borough Park once. He was driving in Borough Park and it was a red light. And so the car stopped. So he says, "Why did we stop?" He says, "Because it's a red light." He looked up and said, "Kemen Gain, we could go. Don't worry about it. You can go." Right? That was the famous joke. Right? But the answer was he wasn't such a makel. He wasn't lenient. It's that he knew the halacha better than everybody else. So much so that my Rebbe, the great Rabelsky, is the one who sent me in the first place to Rabbi Roth. with the acknowledgement that on this, Rabbi Roth knew more than him. That's and the point here is we do not do the fail safe. Fail safe is not halacha. We only go to fail safe if we don't know. But if I can come up with an halacha, then that's the halacha. All right. Now, having said this, that was Shabbos's daf. Let's get to today's daf. Okay, 12b2, the first Mishnah on Yud Beis Amid Beis. Zok the Mishnah. Harei olai legali chatzi nazir. It's incumbent on me to provide for somebody else. So Ruvain is saying this about Shimon. It's I, Ruvain, will need to provide half of the kabbanos, half of the shaving, meaning half of the sacrifices that have to be brought for a nazir. Ushama chaveira v'ama, and his friend Levi hears this and says, "Va'ani olai ligalei chatzi nazir," and it's incumbent on me to provide also a half a nazir, shaving for half a nazir, also to provide half the payment for the kabbanos, for the sacrifices of a nazir. Zem egalech nazir shalom. The first person must provide for the entirety of a nazir, not for half of a nazir's kabbanos, but for the value of the entire, all three kabbanos, the chatos, the oila, and the shlomim. V'zeh megalech nazir shalom, and Levi has to do the same. Divrei Rameir. So says Rameir. Because as we're going to see, Rameir says, you said hare, alai, ami, and there's no such thing as a half of nazir. Okay, v'chachamim oimrim, zeh megalech chatzi nazir, v'zeh megalech chatzi nazir. No, each only has to provide half the value of the sacrifice needed for shaving. Okay, Zakti Gemara, Amar Rava, Hakol Moedim. Everybody agrees. Rameya and the Rabbana. Kol Heicha di Omar, where a person says, Chatzi Kabbanos Nazir Olai. His words are half of the Kabbanos. In other words, he goes straight to the Kabbanos. He doesn't talk about the shaving. He goes, Chatzi Kabbanos Nazir Olai. Half the sacrifices of a nazir are incumbent on me to pay for. Chatzi Karbon Maisi, that he brings only a half a set of kabbanos, because it's not a nazirus and all, it's a neder, it's a vow that he's going to support somebody in their efforts about a nazir. He's going to support them half the value of the kabbanos. If he says kabbanos chatzi nazir, the sacrifices of a half a nazir are incumbent on me. Over there, kulai carbon boyala. The guy has to bring the value of the full set of sacrifices. Why? Because there's no such thing as a half of nazir. Look what he said over there. Kabbanos chatzi nazir. A lie. The sacrifices of a half a nazir are on me. That's no such thing. There's no such thing. There's either a whole nazir or no nazir. There's no such thing as a guy who's a nazir for half. Therefore, in essence, you accept it upon yourself to support the full value of the man's sacrifices. My tama, because we don't find such a thing as a half of nazirus. Nazirus is an all or nothing proposition, whether onto yourself or whether referring to a second person. So chi pligi, where are they arguing? Rameir and the Rabbanon. Bilishna de masnisim pligi. They're arguing in the formulation of the Mishnah, where the Mishnah says, Hare olai ligaleya chatzi nazir. It's upon me to provide for shaving half a nazir. So Rameir Sava, Chivon di Omahare Olai, since he opened up his words with the words, Hare Olai, it's incumbent upon me. Achayev Akula Kabin Naziris. When he said those first two words, what did he do? Hare Olai is a word, is an acceptance of a totality. It's incumbent on me. That's it. You've accepted on you the entire value of a Nazir. 12b3. Vichika machatzi naziros lav kol kamino. That's not in his power. 12b3. That is not in his power. Okay? He doesn't have to think. The second half does not do away with the first. Once you accept it on yourself as Hare Olai, Hare Olai is an acceptance of the totality. The second words do have no way to wipe away the first.
Like Palgin and Dibura.
It's in essence, it's Palgin and Dibura, but I don't even want to go there because the Gemara doesn't use those words, and we're about to get to the idea of Typhus Lashon Rishon. So it could be
the same thing.
That's why I don't want to use those words. Let's wait a little bit. Okay, let's just wait a little bit. And I'm going to explain what I just had the discussion with my father in a second. V'Rabbanon Sabri, no, neder, it's a neder. Hare Olai is a neder. Uposach imoy hu, and its opening for its explanation came right afterwards. By saying Hare Olai, it seems like he took on the value of the entire Nazirus. By saying Chatzi Galeach, half the shaving, he's coming to explain. So now it's a neder that he can go to a Rav and say, listen, this is what I meant. And therefore, says the Rabbanon, you're only chayiv half. Because then it's not a Nazirus, it's only a neder. And if it's a neder, neder is exactly what you said, the value. Now, what my father was saying before, that according to Rameir, he's in essence saying, Palgo Dibura, split his words in half. Hare Olai is one. Chatzi Galeach, half the shaving is two.
By the way, when you say half shaving, it means half
The kabbanis. The kabbanis means
somebody's going to think that.
Right. No, it doesn't mean shaving half the face. It means bringing half the value of the sacrifices that allow him to go ahead and shave.
Right.
So it's Palga Dibura, half words. Palga, half Dibura, words. Palga Dibura. So he says the first words, by definition, went into effect. So the second words are merely contradicting the first words. I do away with the first words. Another way of looking at this is these terms. Toifis, Lashon Rishon. The first words, Lashon Rishon, are toifis, establish. In other words, the first words out of your mouth establish what you mean. So if any words afterwards contradict, they're ignored.
You find in a court of law, when the lawyer asks something and the witness answers and tries to explain, the lawyer says, no, that's it.
That's it. Exactly. Yeah. On the other hand, there is a second mandiyama that holds Toifis Lashon Sheni, Toifis Lashon Basra. The last words explain what you meant with the first words.
Rabbi Yossi.
That's Rabbi Yossi. So again, but right now Rameir clearly holds Palgo Dibura. We split his words in half, and the first words define, and the second words by definition, which are a contradiction, are out into the garbage. The Chachamim say no. In fact, this is not an acceptance of Nazirus. In essence, your second words are making this into a neder. A neder is something, a vow, a simple vow. You can go ahead and say, my words open a door to allow me to annul or to explain what I really meant. That's all. Now the next Mishnah takes this another step further. Hareini nozik l'sheishli ben. I am a Nazir when a son is born to me. Now, does this mean a son or a child? So right now, at this moment in time, we're going to teach it exactly the way it is. A son. I am thereby a Nazir when a son is born to me. V'noiled loy bain, and Itaka has a son. Hareze Nazir, it's a Nazir. Hang on, my wife is calling me. Just hang on 1 second. Rachel, I'm in the middle of giving shir. Yeah, thank you. I spoke with Zevi Gibbs actually in shul, and he said it's he said it's a nasal drip, and he said I should probably go to the pharmacy to get spray up the nose before before the evening, because he said this has been going around. I explained to him the exact thing. Okay, very good. Let me go back to learning. Very good. Kultiv. Sorry about that. Last night I have a post nasal drip. All of a sudden, I was gasping for air. I literally couldn't breathe. I sounded like a donkey, like that, like mama's like a donkey. And I didn't, Baruch Hashem, I didn't panic. But it took me 3 minutes to be able to really regain breathing normally. I really was a little scared. Daddy reminded me of one of mommy's asthma attacks back in the day. So I went to shul today. I asked one of the Hatzalah guys. He said, "Listen, it's a pulse nasal drip. It can happen, especially at night. It gets stuck over there, and it just." So he just told me go get a nasal spray or something to shoot up the nose,
to dry the nose.
To dry the nose, so that especially at night. During the day you're moving around and all that, but at night you're slowing down and all that. So that's why I sound like Marlon Brando over here. So that's it. Anyways, so very good. So the Gemara, the Mishnah says, and anyways, the Eibishter wanted me to give shears, so he's giving me the kayach over here. If a son is born to him, Hareze Nazir. He's a Nazir, no question about it. Noilid loy bas, but if he has a daughter, or a tumtum or an androgynous. A tumtum is a child where there is a membrane over the genital areas, so we do not know whether it's a male or a female. An androgynous is exactly as we know, has both male and female characteristics. Einoi Nazir is not a Nazir. Now, Jeff, here your question comes into play. A tumtum is either a definite boy or a definite girl. The only problem here is that there's a membrane, there's a skin that grew over the genital area. So here he's a definite. Your only problem is that I can't tell you what he is. That's not a suffix. That's very similar to the tchum when you want to put a ketchup bottle 2,000 amas this way or 2,000 amas this way because you don't know which way the rabbi is coming, right? That's a chesaron. It's a chesaron in yediyah, in knowledge, not thing. So here the question really should be that he should be a nazir misafik. He should be a nazir misafik. Out of doubt, your question. The answer is something we learned before. A person does not accept nazirut unless he's definitive. Remember we learned that? If a person is not definitive, it's not an acceptance of nazirus. Here he says, I want a son. What did he mean by a son? He meant because it's a son. Hang on 1 second. Reb Shlomo, I'm giving shir. I'll call you back right afterwards, okay? Okay. So, since that's the thing over here. You're right. Jeff, your argument that you made before that we were talking about. Here, he's a definite boy or a girl. he's covered up. So I don't know. But that's a problem in my knowledge, not in the essence of the human being. Nonetheless, my acceptance of Nazirus was on a definite boy and where there were no questions in the first place. So that's how we have to learn this. Now we go further. Im amakishahayali volad. But if he says, I am a Nazir, if I have a child, not a son, a child, even if a daughter is born to him, tumtum, or an androgynous, harez a Nazir. He's a Nazir because it's a child. Let me take you a step further.
Even if he has a mamzer.
Now a mamzer is definitely a son. That's not even the thing. But what my father just touched on, everybody knows there's a mitzvah to have children. With these children, an androgynous or a tumtum, a daughter or a son, whether legally or not legally, you mekayim your mitzvah of having children. Now, that's not according to everybody, because there is a mandi omer that says that you're only mekayim the mitzvah when you have grandchildren. Because if you have grandchildren, banim arayim, b'nei banim arayim kibanim, then that's the proof that you're continuing your generations, which is the whole purpose of having children. Okay? That the generations should continue.
Children.
What?
You can't have grandchildren if you don't have children.
Right. And the fact that you have grandchildren is proof that your children are having children. You're going to, in other words, you never die. Once you're at that point, you live forever. Good morning, Rachel. Thanks for calling in and asking. Everybody wanted to know why I sound like Marlon Brando. So there you go. So this, in this case, Harez a Nazir. You're a Nazir. Okay? Because it's a child. There's no question about it. Okay, we are now on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, which is today's daf. Here we go. Yud Gimel Amud Aleph 13a1. Now it goes a little further. Interesting case. He piloi ishtoi. If the wife has a miscarriage, Einoi Nazir, he's not a Nazir because it was a miscarriage. Rab Shimon Omer, in fact, no. He happens to be a Nazir out of doubt. Maybe the child was viable. Yomi, he says, Im ben kayama, if in truth it was a viable child, then harayani Nazir chayva. I'm a Nazir by my previous obligation. The imlav, and if it wasn't, it was a true miscarriage. Haray ani Nazir nidavar. I am a voluntary Nazir, meaning I am volunteering bringing the kabbanis. What does this mean? What does this mean? What Rab Shimon is saying is brilliant, as always. We have a problem whenever there's a doubt. There's a problem with regard to bringing the sacrifices. Because if you don't have to bring the sacrifices, then you have a problem of what's known as chulin ba'azara, non-sacred stuff in the Beis Hamikdash. You're not allowed to sacrifice animals that are not sanctified in the Beis Hamikdash. So if you didn't have to bring them, they don't belong there. So Rab Shimon says, make a tenai, a condition. If I really am a Nazir because the child was viable, great, then I have to bring the Nazir stuff. If not, then I bring nidavos, voluntary offerings. You know what the problem with this is, Daddy? You know what the problem is? The problem is, what are the three kabbanos? An oila, a shlamim, and a chatos. A chatos can only be brought by the person who did the sin. Right. A chatos is a sin offering. By Nazir, we didn't want you to really be a Nazir, so the Torah says bring a chatos, right? But the chatos you can't bring. So in fact, this guy can only bring both two of the three kabbanos, the oila and the shlamim. He cannot bring all three. But the halacha is bidi eved de facto. If you don't bring all three, you bring only one or two, it's okay, you're good to go.
Machlok, it's only according to the Chachamim.
Yeah, no, this is according to Reb Shimon. This is Reb Shimon Oima. Yeyama. Ima ya ben kayama harei ani nozer chayva. V'im lav harei ani nozer nidova. If not, I'm a voluntary nazir. Now, how could you be a voluntary nazir on the doubt if there's a chatos, a sin offering? A sin offering you can't bring.
No, it's not really a sin.
No, but Daddy, the halach is the chatos is not brought.
Then anybody, a guy comes along, he says, I want to be a nazir.
Right?
That's a nadova.
Right?
So
No.
he, at the end of 30 days, he has to bring three
No.
covenants.
Okay. And let me just see it this. Maybe I'm wrong. One
Yeah.
second. Now then if there's not give me a second.
The first one is a choiva if it comes out through the fact that he the condition was
Very good. Very
So-
good. My father's right.
or it could be
He became a
anybody
nazir.
can become a nazir, and
Right.
there's no available.
Right.
It's real chatas.
Got it. So my father is explaining something else. My father's absolutely right. What Rab Shimon is saying, if this child was viable, then my words that I will be Ruvain's words that I will be a nazir. If my wife has a child, he becomes a nazir based on his own words. And if it was not a viable child, I will also become a nazir. But it's now a new acceptance of Nazirus. It's a brand new acceptance of Nazirus. Very good.
That's called a nadova.
Right. It doesn't mean Nidava like I said Nidava. Right. I misunderstood this Mishnah. Daddy, you're absolutely correct. So therefore, Imlav, Harei Ani Nazir Nidava, meaning I am now accepting on myself without any preconditions a Nazir. This way, either way, you got rid of the suffix, the uncertainty.
Right.
If the child was viable, then I'm a Nazir because I said I will become a Nazir if it's a viable child, if it's a child. And so therefore I could bring the Kabbanas. And if it was not, then I'm accepting on myself a new Nazirus. Either way, it's not Chulin Be'azara. It's not unsanctified stuff in the courtyard.
So he brings all korbanos?
All three, yes, because I made a mistake. Voluntary doesn't mean that it's a voluntary. It means he's accepting full naziros voluntarily, not because he said the words, I will become a nazir if I have a child. I'm just accepting the zeros because I'm accepting the zeros. Why not?
When it could be a chulin bazora.
Yeah.
When it's a suffix, maybe you're not really a nazir. You're not chal. So you don't know. So just the fact that you're going to say, well, since I don't know, it's a suffix, I'm going to be machbar myself, and I'm going to make myself I'm going to keep the Nazirus anyway, based on that suffix. Then you would be right. Then it would become
problematic.
Become a chulin bazora.
Right. In other words,
if you're not really a nazir, you're bringing a korban that you're not supposed to bring.
In other words, what my father is saying like this, you have this case of a miscarriage. If he were to only say, what he called, if this child was viable, I was mechuyev to be a nazir. So you know what? I'm just going to do it. Since I'm not 100% sure, I'll do it just in case. That's problematic. That's problematic because maybe the child wasn't viable and you're not a nazir.
Right.
But if you add the next thing, you go what's known as Tanai Kofel, a doubled up condition. If it was viable, I'm a Nazir because of my original declaration. And if it was not a viable child, I'm a Nazir because of a new declaration.
That's an adult.
That's it. And so therefore that you covered both sides. But if you didn't say the second half and you hinged everything on the first because you were uncertain,
Maybe you're
and
not.
on an uncertainty, you can't bring components into the base of English because maybe it's schooling.
Right.
You guys see it?
Mhm.
Jerry, Jeff, David, you got it?
Yeah.
Right? It's interesting. Now it goes like this. Listen to this. V'choza v'yolda. What happens if she gives birth again, this time to a viable child? Now, what does this mean? Does this mean she was carrying twins?
Yeah.
So let's go with that. There's others that say, no, it means she gets pregnant again and she has a baby. But we're going to go with the Pasha Pshat, viable child, that she had twins. And the second child comes out and it's viable. Hareze Nazir, they are a Nazir. Why? Why is it a Nazir? For this reasons, right?
He said that I'll be a Nazir if I have
Right.
a viable child.
Right? That's it. Rav Shimon Amar, he's still again a Nazir out of doubt, right? Because you might have meant your original child.
That's right.
So the Gemara says, Yeyoma, Ima Rishon ben Kayama, if the first child was viable and just died, Harishan Chayva B'Zen Nadava. The first Naziris was obligatory, and this one is voluntary. The Imla, but if the first one was not viable, Harishan Nadava B'Zu Chayva, which would certainly seem to say that he has to hold two terms of Naziris. Right. Zakti Gemara. First thing. In the first case of the Mishnah, Hareini Nazik the Sheiloi Bain, Noilodoi Bain, Hareze Nazif. If a guy says I'm going to be a Nazir, if I have a son and he has a son, he's a Nazir. Obviously. Hi Malamema, what are you coming to teach me? Zakti Gemara Bishum Seifa. I'm coming to teach you. That's just the introduction to get me to the Seifa. Bas tumtum ubedroigenis ain't a Nazir. Zakti Gemara Pshita. That's also obviously. You said Ben, an obvious son. The tumtum is not an obvious son. The androgynous says both, and a bas is clearly. Obviously, in today's world, apparently, you can be anything you want at any point. So the guy would have to be a Nazir according to the liberals today. But anyways, but that is.
By the way, how do you classify an androgynous, a hermaphrodite?
Hermaphrodite, yeah. Androgynous, it exists today.
How do you classify it, as a male or a female?
No.
Or unclassified.
Actually, there's Gemaras that ask this question. Is an androgynous a barrier bifnei atzmai? Is it a third kind? Neither this nor that. The real question becomes, an androgynous has a problem. Which mitzvahs does it keep? First of all, is it mechuyev in mitzvahs? Because a man is mechuyev in mitzvahs.
What?
A man is mechuyev in mitzvahs, and a woman is mechuyev in mitzvahs. If an androgynous is a third way, then the Torah wasn't talking to an androgynous.
No, I don't think so.
I'm just laying out the question.
From a Jewish mother.
Jewish. Again, you heard what I said.
Right.
Yes, born from a Jewish mother, but if it's not male and it's not female, and it's if it's a barrier bifnei atzmai, Daddy, a blind person is Jewish. He's patur mikol mitzvahs.
Because he's considered like dead.
He's blind. Rabbi Yossi tried to argue that through Shas that no, he is mechuyev. So, what is an androgynous? Is it a third way? We don't. So, It's not for here. But my father's question does come up in the Gemara. We will eventually get to it. And it's a fascinating question. And today, especially, it has ramifications.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's only a blind person if he's born blind, but if he goes blind during his years, then he's still chayav with the mitzvahs. It's only
Actually, that too is an argument, because Rabbi Yossi became blind later in life. And that's where that came up. Does a blind person cease being mechuyev in mitzvahs when he becomes blind? That is a question. And here's, I'll give you the better one. We know that a shaita, someone who's crazy, is not mechuyev in mitzvahs. Okay?
Right.
What happens if he went crazy and then he gets better? Do we say nesa sha'achas nesa li'olam? If you weren't mechuyev in mitzvahs for one moment, you shouldn't be mechuyev forever.
No,
Of course, that's not the way. I'm just posing the questions. I'm going to personalize this, Daddy. I apologize. But my father and I had this question. My mother, at the end of her life, unfortunately suffered from dementia. Yom Kippur came at the point where my mother was no longer talking, and she was completely reliant on other people. We asked the Shiloh, what do we do with Yom Kippur, with my mother? And we were told, Daddy, remember what we were told? We were told, whatever happens over there in that room that the nurse does is not your business.
Right.
Your mother is no longer mechuyev in mitzvahs. That's it. When a person can no longer be in control of themselves, they're completely reliant on somebody else, they're not mechuyev in mitzvahs.
Right.
See, things can change. You see what I'm trying to say? And we asked the Shiloh, of course. We asked the Shiloh, how do you handle it? You hope never to have the Shiloh, but we had the Shiloh. We're not the first to have the Shiloh. It's preparation halacha, right? It is what it is. Okay, unfortunately, we should be the last to have those Shilohs. The point here is, so all of these questions are in fact going to be answered. Even the question I asked you about Tumtum, is he a male or a female? The answer is he's definitely a male or a female. It's just covered over. And how do we handle it? The Gemara in other places asks this question.
Well, eventually it can be by doing what you call a
surgery.
Surgery.
Today they do a surgery. In the times of the Gemara, it was very difficult to do the surgery. It could have caused death. So that's the reason why they never did that. But there are all these things are going to be discussed in the Gemara. Not in our Gemara Pacific, but in Gemara's coming up, we're going to get into these conversations, and they are fascinating because it will lead to what is a thing, what is a clone, think about all of these questions. You can see how you can take from one topic and apply it to another topic. But let's keep moving over here because otherwise we are never going to finish the daf, and theoretically we're supposed to finish in 10 minutes. Here we go. So, Zakti Gemara, Mahai Malamema, right? What do we, the first case is nothing. Mishum Seifa, Bas Tumtum Badraginis ain't a Nazir. Pshita, that's obvious too. He said only a son, clearly a viable son. Mao desemedli shebone hudiama. When he said a son, he didn't mean a son. He meant a child. When I will build up, when I will build a family. Kamash Malandalai, that no, when a guy says a son, he means a son. Okay?
The word ben and binyan
is the same thing. It's the same thing. Comes from the same thing.
root.
Same root. 13A2. 13A2. Okay, we continue down. The im amakishiyeli balad, but if he says I will be a nazir when I have a child, then even if he has a daughter or a tumtum or an androgynous, he's a nazir. Pshita, that's obvious. That's a child. Ma'u the same of balad demechashe b'nei inchi b'nei. You might have said that when he said I will be a nazir if I have a child. We need a child that's considered prominent among people, meaning a son. Son are the ones you take to shul. They're prominent. Kamash Malad, no. All your kids are prominent. They're all good. There we go. Hipiloi ishtoi ain't a nazir. If the wife had a miscarriage, she's not a nazir. The Mishnah is referring to a case where the child did not survive, and it's unclear whether it was born viable or not. Man Ketani law, who teaches this? This is Rabbi Yehuda the Kriu. This is Rabbi Yehuda of the Kri. If you remember back at the beginning of the Masech on Daf Ches Amid Aleph, it said over there, I will be a Nazir. Amanas sheyesh Kri zet kuf kor, that there is in this pile enough, like 100 core of grain, and then it gets lost or stolen, and there's no way to know. The Rabbi Yehuda Mati, Rabbi Yehuda said, it's okay, you're not a Nazir. Why? The suffix Nazirus lahakel, because when I have an uncertainty on Nazirus, we're lenient. We say you only accept Nazirus if what? If it's definite. If it's definite. Now, Reb Shimon Yomer, no. We got an issue here. Im hoyu ben kayama hareini no chayva. Im blab hareini nozen the dova. Either it's a chayva based on my words, or not. It's a brand new nedava. Now the Gemara says, Boyimine Rav Abba ba me Rav Huna. Hareini nozel gishoyeli ben. If someone says, I will be a nozel when I have a son, and his wife lost the child, she had a miscarriage, v'hifrish carbon, and he set aside the kabbanos, he set aside 3 animals to be the chatas to oil and the shlamim, the chazra v'yolda, and she gave birth to a second child that same day, meaning a twin. Mahu, what's the halacha? Aliba demand. Who's he talking to? Aliba de Rab Shimon. My Tabayla. What's his question? Ha Amar Rab Shimon suffered Naziris lahakmir. Rab Shimon said, an uncertainty in Naziris, we go stringent. You make that condition. If it was viable, I'm a Nazir based on the viability. And if it was not viable, I'm a Nazir, brand new Nazir. Right? That's what we said. Ella liba de Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar Suffolk Naziris lahakel, who says uncertainty on Naziris is lenient. What are we talking about? The status of the animal. Kadosh or like Kadosh. Is it sacred or not sacred? My nafkamina. What's the difference? Right? You can't bring it. What are you going to do with those kabbanas, even if they are holy, even if they are sanctified? Because the bottom line is you put them aside. Can I bring them? No. I can't bring them. I can't bring them because maybe I was not a Nazir. And it's a suffix chulabazar. So my nafkamina, the answer is whether shearing it, you put aside 3 sheep, can I shear off their wool, or can I go ahead and work with them? Now that's already something else. You're right. The actual Nazirus, according to Rabbi Yehuda, goes lenient. It's not a Nazirus. It's uncertain the situation. It's not a Nazirus.
So you're allowed to.
But since I went ahead and I opened up my mouth and I was Mekadesh, I sanctified 3 animals. Do I say, despite the fact that the reason for my sanctification is meaningless because there was no Nazirus, so I didn't have to sanctify these animals. So in reality, they shouldn't be sanctified. But we have a rule, once something is sanctified, you cannot remove its sanctification. So now's the question. Was this really a sanctification or was it not? If it was not, because the whole underlying reason behind it was meaningless, So then I'm allowed to use these animals and share them. If at the end of the day it doesn't matter, it's an acceptance of sanctification on these animals, I'm not allowed to. And for the Gemara, Teku, let it stand. The question remains unresolved. And Jeff, like you said way back at the beginning, where it's unresolved, then you go l'chumrah. You heard what I just said? If it's unresolved, then you're stringent. And you can't use the animals. But in the case of what we were talking about, the meat on power line or the meat in your bag, there it's not unresolved. It is resolved. If it's separated and you find it out on power line, kol the parish meruba parish. From where if it separates from the majority, and the majority is kosher meat, you can go for it. If it's found in your bag, it means you took it off a shelf. You have the same probability to go into each store equally. Each store is unique unto itself, it's mutually exclusive. No, in that case, it's not, it's forbidden. So it's not a teku. It's not that we default to an uncertainty, it's unresolved. It is resolved. The cases are different. They therefore have two different rules. But here I can't resolve it. Here I can't resolve it. I have no choice but to go stringent. You see the difference?
Yeah, I do see. Thank you.
That's it. And that's your question is a fundamental question. The answer is not to default to the easiest thing. You only default when I can't resolve it. If I could resolve it, don't default. Got it? I'll give you an example. Jeff has been having a little trouble with his hip. The cartilage has disappeared and the bones are rubbing against each other. He had a choice. He can take cortisone shots and keep on taking the cortisone shots, and they might help, and they might not help, and they could push off doing surgery for 5 years, at which point Jeff will be 5 years older. Or he could say, no, it's definitive that there's no cartilage. The bones are rubbing one against the other. Inevitably, I'm going to have to do surgery, whether now or in 5 years from now. Now I'm X age. In 5 years from now, I'm going to be Y age. What do I do? And Jeff, the answer is?
Do it now.
That's it. Do it now. And we were all going to have in mind this Thursday, when we learned the Daf Yomi. What's your name again? Jeff?
Yosef ben Abba Abraham.
No, what's your mother's name? Yosef ben?
Ben Elaine.
Elaine. Yosef ben Elaine Halevi. Okay, so we have to remember that for Thursday. Okay, right? Thursday, you're going to be going for surgery, if I remember correctly.
Thursday, yes.
So we have you in mind. We're going to learn the Daf Yomi on your behalf. And bottom line is, you know what you're doing? You're doing exactly what Chazal would tell you to do. Because the resolution is obvious. Once you talk it out, the resolution is simple. It's straightforward.
Where do you have him done? In the general hospital?
Yeah.
Boca General, yes.
Yeah, Boca Regional. Right.
Boca Regional, yes.
Right. It's a very good hospital, Daddy. Excellent hospital.
I know.
Really. All the missing, by the way, all the missing Jewish doctors are there.
Yeah.
All the YU doctor. And Jeff, don't you have a Jewish doctor?
Jewish doctor.
There you go. They're all there. I'm not kidding. It's amazing. Anyways, but literally, your thought process, the way you work through it, Jeff, is this Gemara. Exactly. You put it together and you come to the same conclusion. It's exactly how the Gemara is working these things out. Literally the same logic. It's called Jewish logic. And then you make the decision accordingly. It's only when it's unresolved, then you default. But default is not the first the first idea, first thing you trip. That's the last thing you trip. When we get to a teku, okay, now we'll wait until Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, shows up. But until then, right, we don't like such an answer because it means we drove ourselves to a dead end. Jews don't believe in dead ends. By that, or to quote Shimon Peres, a problem by definition has a solution. If it doesn't have a solution, it's no longer a problem. It's a fact of life, and now you got to live with it.
That's true.
Very Jewish thing. To me, it is a way of. I got to quote. I quoted L'Shem Omrei, Shimon Peres. It's brilliant. Let me repeat that. A problem by definition has a solution. If it doesn't have a solution, it's no longer a problem. It's a fact of life. Got to live with it, and that's it. And and you go further. Zakti Gemara. In other words, the Palestinians are a fact of life. We got to deal with it. Ben Rechumi said to Abaya, Hareini Nazir Geshoyeli Bein. If Reuben says, I will be a Nazir when I have a son. And the friend says, and on me as well. Mahu. Is he saying, Adibure Mashma? He's referring to all his words, meaning that he too will be a Nazir when the first person has a son. Reuven said, when I have a son, I will be a Nazir. Shimon said, V'alai me, that when you, Reuven, have your son, I will join you in Nazirus. Or Agupe Mashmi was talking about himself, meaning just like you, Reuven, when you have a son, you're going to be a Nazir. So too I, Shimon, when I have a son, I will be a Nazir. Which way is he talking about? We're now on 13a3. If you're going to say he's talking about himself, that I, Shimon, will also be a Nazir when I have a son. Then what about the case? Already Nazir Libain. I am a Nazir when I will have a son. Vishama Chaverai, and his friend Shimon hears V'amar Ve'ani, and I. He doesn't say V'alai, on me. He just says, and I. Mahu, Anapshe Kama. Is he talking about that he'll become a Nazir when he has his own son? I love you. So I'm going to join you as a Nazir when you have a son. You hear? So Zakti Gemara, Imtim Sulaima al Anpe, he's saying it on the first person's presence. That means when you have a son, I will join you in the Nazirus. We're now on Amid Beis, getting to the Mishnah where we're going to stop. 13b1, Kiseifa Le Milsa. It's embarrassing for him to use this occasion to express his desire to have his own son, right? We could still ask this following question. When Reuven says, I will be a Nazir when Shimon has a son. V'shama chaverai, and Shimon hears. V'ama v'ani, and I, mahu, what's the din? Mi amrinim shaloi b'fanov. Do we say that since Shimon said this, not in the presence of the third person? In other words, my mistake. Reuven says that I will be a Nazir when Shimon has a son. And Levi hears it. And Levi says, and I, right? Mahu, miyaminim shaloi b'fanov. When Levi said, and I, he was not in the presence of Shimon. Anavshikam, he was talking about himself, meaning that when I have a son, I will have become a Nazir. I love him as you do, and I will be a Nazir when he has a son. Right? Teku, Tibaye, it's a good question. There's no way to know psychologically what people mean, right? And therefore the question remains unresolved. And therefore, guess what? You got to be a Nazir. No, you got to be you're in big trouble. In other words, you're going to have to be a Nazir and you can't bring the kabbanis, right?
Right.
And now that means You just made yourself into a Nazir forever. Until you annul it. Obviously, you have to go to a rabbi and annul it.
Yeah.
Obviously. Very good, everybody. We're stopping over here at the Mishnah because tomorrow's daf is really all one long sugya. Okay? We'll find the place where to stop tomorrow.
What time